New polling shows most Australians still support the US alliance, despite holding a negative view towards the Trump administration and harbouring deep doubts about the future of American democracy. The poll captures some of the complexities of Australian attitudes towards its key security ally as Anthony Albanese prepares to travel to Washington, D.C. for his face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts joins us now. A very good morning to you, Stephen. Now, there's no doubt that some Australians hold mixed feelings towards Donald Trump, but do the numbers really tell us how they regard the administration?
Yeah, that's right, Catherine. It's a complicated picture in some ways. Now, this poll confirms what other polls have told us before, which is Australians don't much like Donald Trump. So, for example, when Australians in this poll for the United States Studies Centre are asked whether they think that this administration has been good for Australia, only 16% say that they do believe that it's been good for Australia. So you can see all of the tariffs, for example, that the administration has whacked on Australia, and some of the attitudes that we've seen out of the White House. That has had an impact on the way that Australians regard Donald Trump and regard America. Not only that, they're very negative if you ask them about how the administration's policies are playing out in the Asia-Pacific region. You've only got 25% who say that they think that it's been helpful, 33% say that it's been very harmful. So you get a real sense that Australians don't much like Donald Trump and don't like this administration and don't think it's been good for the country. But there is a broader picture which is interesting, and that is when you ask Australians whether that means they should dump the alliance, the answer broadly is no. In fact, 54% of Australians altogether say that they still support the alliance, although large numbers are still unsure. And not only that, about 47% say that they need the alliance, or that Australia needs the alliance more than ever, despite the fact that they're so negative towards Donald Trump. And interestingly, there's also been a shift over the last few years when Australians were asked a couple of years ago whether they believe that if Donald Trump was re-elected, whether Australia should respond by dumping the alliance. More than 1 in 3 Australians said yes, but now it's actually happened. Now that Trump has been re-elected and we're seeing all the impacts playing out, when Australians are asked whether they still hold that view, that actually drops by some 20 points. So only 17% of Australians actually say now on this poll that they think the alliance should be dumped. So I guess what that just reflects is that Australians are worried about the US. They don't like what Donald Trump is doing, but in the end, they see no real alternative to the alliance in this really strategically uncertain moment.
Stephen, the poll also looked at AUKUS. What did it find?
Yeah, this is fascinating. The poll shows pretty strong support for AUKUS. In fact, only a very small number of Australians say that they believe AUKUS should be dumped, although large numbers of Australians, unsurprisingly, say that they believe that that there are still questions over it, or that they're uncertain about it, and a substantial minority would like to see it go. A really interesting statistic, though: only 27% of Australians say that they believe the government has really explained exactly why these nuclear-powered submarines are necessary. So I guess that just speaks to the fact that there's a real hunger out there from Australians for more explanation from the government about why these submarines are needed, why this vast expenditure is necessary, and how it fits into that broader strategic picture.
So when you take this all into account, Stephen, what does it say about the way Australians generally think about this key relationship?
Look, there are just lots of complexities and contradictions here, basically. We didn't touch on this before, but it's also worth noting when you ask Australians if they're worried about the future of democracy in the US, 73% say yes. So Australians aren't complacent about what's happening in the US. They know that it's going through an extremely tumultuous moment. But in the end, I think it probably reflects a reality which Australians are grappling with, which is there is simply no ready substitute for the alliance. They know that the US remains indispensable to Australia's security. So whilst they are down on Donald Trump, whilst they're worried about what's going to happen to the United States, and whilst they've got deep reservations about what's happening under the Trump administration, in the end, most Australians seem to have concluded, at least for now, that they simply have to stick with the devil that they know, and that might explain some of those contradictions in these numbers.